some Republicans, like Senator Rand Paul, are saying, well, you know, I don't care what the Supreme Court says. They don't decide what's constitutional, except for the fact that they do. And then you've got people like Matt Davis, who's the former spokesman for the Michigan Republican Party. Now, look, he's not an overwhelmingly important guy in the Republican Party overall, but, you know, it gives you a sense of where some Republicans are in their thinking. And you would imagine that every Republican in Michigan should condemn this guy, but we haven't seen it yet. So what did Matt Davis say? He said, quote, if government can mandate that I pay for something I don't want, then what is beyond its power? If the Supreme Court's decision Thursday paves the way for unprecedented intrusion into personal decisions, then has the Republic all but ceased to exist? So when they don't get their way, the Republic ceases to exist. And on a law that is not about the structure of our government, right. It's on a policy. Policy is very important, immigration, environment, healthcare, etc. But it's not about our republic, right? It's just a law you disagree with. Right. There's a lot of laws I disagree with. I don't think the republic ceases to exist because of them. But so this is the end for them because, God forbid, some poor people might get healthcare in this country. Okay, but we're at the tip of the iceberg. He continues. If so, then is armed rebellion today justified? God willing, this oppression will be lifted and America free again before the first shot is fired. I mean, how clear is this as a look? I mean, this is an incitement to violence. I actually think there's some chance this guy should be arrested.
We're back to the rhetoric that we were hearing from the right over and over and over before Gabby Giffords got shot. With the gun sight on her congressional district and everything else, they chilled out for a little bit, even though they thought it was outrageous to connect their violent rhetoric with the fact that guys who listened to them would sometimes commit violence. Now it's creeping back in.
Yeah, and this is a call to arms. This is his own little Michigan militia. Literally, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And so he's going to continue. We're not done yet. Okay, so he says there are times government has to do things that to get what it wants and holds a gun to your head. And I'm saying at some point we have to ask the question: when do we turn that gun around and say no and resist? Well, you don't. You know, I mean, like the government forces you to do all the things that are laws. It forces you not to kill people. It forces you to pay your taxes. It forces you to follow the laws.
It forces you not to try and incite people to pick up guns and fire shots.
Right. And that doesn't mean that you get to, quote unquote, turn the gun around and start firing at government officials. That's lunacy. Now, that's a call to anarchy.
Now, quick thought experiment. What do you think would have happened if President Mitt Romney had passed this law? And it was still called Romneycare, because it's essentially like Romneycare in Massachusetts. Do you think that Matt Davis would still be calling for armed revolution if a white Republican rather than an African-American Democrat had passed this law? Just discuss.
I don't have a good answer for the racial part of it, because I think they despise all Democrats and liberals so thoroughly that I think that race is a small factor in it. I think that whenever they're like little children, whenever they don't get their way, they're like, no, I want it. Well, if I have to do an armed rebellion, I'm going to do an armed rebellion. And so, but your point is an amazing one, because I believe not just the clowns like Matt Davis, but that the four Supreme Court justices that ruled the other way, if it was a mandate, which was originally a Republican conservative idea, and it was Mitt Romney who had done the mandate, let's say in an alternate universe he wins in 2008, I think those four justices would have voted in a second to say, of course mandate is fine. Right. What are you talking about?
There's
and
no
Scalia,
question.
who appears to have written it, they didn't sign it, the dissenting judges, but it's got Scalia's hallmarks all over it.
But I'm not sure that Kennedy didn't either. I mean, they didn't sign it. Well, anyway, we'll get to that. But as vocal as Kennedy has been within there.
But it was so obnoxious. That's my point. The dissent was like, this is so obvious and it's logical.
It is consistent with Scalia. You're right.
Anyone else who thinks so is feeble-minded, etc., right? Now, they would have written the same exact way, but on the other side, if it was Romney's mandate, I know it. It's a fact, okay? Now, you got to give Roberts a lot of credit, because I would have guessed he would have done the same thing, but he didn't, right? So, now, Matt Davis isn't done yet. He's got more, okay? Quote, armed rebellion is the end point of that physical confrontation, meaning with the law, okay? So he's telling people, pick up your guns, because, my God, children under the age of 26, if they're still living with their parents, might get health insurance. If you have a pre-existing condition, you might get covered. My God, let's go kill somebody.
You know, and there's precedent for taking this really seriously. You know, that his remarks, you look at the whole Timothy McVeigh story in Oklahoma City. It began as the Michigan militia, and that was what, or part of it, that's where Terry Nichols came from. These people who were so incensed, and Obviously, coincidence that Matt Davis is from Michigan. But when you hear people say these things, now you have to take notice. And government and police and whomever should look at that and listen to that, because that's really scary, really sort of murderous rhetoric.
No, they're
Thought
too
experiment
busy.
number 2.
All right.
What if Matt Davis was a Muslim?
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going to. Because they're too busy, especially in Michigan, when there are a lot of Muslim Americans,
Yeah.
right? Tracking the Muslims and infiltrating their mosques, et cetera, as they did in New York, right? But here's a guy saying in open, no, I want to grab a gun and I want to shoot it at the government.
Yeah.
Well, okay, well, I would look into that guy.
Yeah.
Which religious institution is he going to? Who is he talking to? I mean, because if you're going to do it to Muslims, here's a guy advertising that he'd like to shoot you. You might want to look into him, right? And by the way, they came to him and they said, hey, listen, come on now, second chance here. This is crazy talk. You want to rethink it? Here was his quote. Quote, here's my response. And yes, I mean it. Okay, all right, well, you're clear.
Remember a couple years ago when Homeland Security was looking into the violent white radical extremists, and the right wing got outraged and said back off? This is an entire conservative movement that doesn't even want its own violent element investigated. That's insanity, but that's what we're dealing with now.
And so often they'll say, well, maybe not all Muslims are terrorists, but they don't condemn them enough.
Right.
So here's a guy who's a right winger who's actually had an important position within the Republican Party in the state of Michigan. I guess if you don't condemn it, if you're a Republican, well, you're guilty, just as guilty as he is. We can play the Peter King game all day long. And let me add one last point here. I think let's explore Richard's point just a little bit more. If it was a Mohammed Abdullah who said, hey, you know what, I disagree with whatever policy, the energy policy, the immigration policy, the healthcare policy, okay? And said, I'm going to grab a gun, and I think all of you should grab a gun and start an armed rebellion and think about shooting government officials.
Right.
Is there any chance that guy doesn't immediately get arrested?
No, of course not, and which is why I don't think you can dismiss what Richard said, or you didn't dismiss it, you just didn't engage it or speak about it. I think the racial component here in the way that people view our president cannot be understated. I really do think it's a big part of it, and I think it's a big part of it just because of what you just said. I think that you get freer range when you have a black president to say things like this, or you get license from within your own party to do that. So I don't think you can just dismiss that at all.